Weekends used to be ours. Slow mornings with pancakes, a little gardening, maybe a drive to the coast just because we could. But lately, Ryan's been slipping out before sunrise every Saturday, moving quietly around the house like he's trying not to wake me. Backpack over one shoulder, thermos in hand, he kisses my cheek and says the same thing every time. Off to the trails. Apparently, hiking is his new passion, a way to clear his mind. At first, I thought it was great. Everyone needs an escape, right? But when I offered to join him, he just smiled and shook his head. You wouldn't like it, Em. These trails are brutal, all rocks and steep climbs. His voice was soft, but it had that finality to it, like the conversation was already over. I laughed it off, but inside I felt a little shut out. Why was he so sure I couldn't handle it? Every Saturday played out the same way. He'd be gone all day, returning after dark with dusty clothes and windblown hair. But his stories were always vague. Trail names that didn't stick, descriptions that felt like copy-paste from a travel blog. And then there was the thing I couldn't ignore. Not a single photo. No sunrise shots, no breathtaking landscapes. Just words. And something about that didn't sit right with me. The first couple of weekends, I didn't push. I told myself maybe he just wanted something that was his. No schedules, no sharing, no pressure. But the more I thought about it, the more that tiny itch of curiosity started to grow. Ryan wasn't the type to do anything without a little fanfare. He'd once documented an entire trip to the hardware store with 15 photos and a video of the perfect screwdriver. Now he's supposedly spending 10 hours on a trail and comes back with nothing? Not even a blurry picture of a tree? One Saturday, I suggested he could at least bring back a few photos for me. You know I'd love to see where you go, I said, keeping my voice light. He smiled, a little too quickly, and said, Sure, if I remember. The next week, when I asked, he told me his phone had died halfway through the hike. The week after that, he said he forgot to take any. It was becoming a pattern, and I couldn't decide if it was laziness or something else. At night, while he showered, I'd sometimes catch myself staring at his backpack in the corner, wondering what was really in there. Boots? Snacks? Maybe a camera? I didn't check. Not yet. But a part of me knew I was heading toward that moment. Something wasn't adding up, and the gap between his words and my instincts was getting harder to ignore. By the fourth weekend, I'd stopped pretending I wasn't keeping track. I knew exactly what time he left, exactly how long he was gone, and exactly how vague his stories were when he got back. Oh, just a few miles past Pine Ridge, he'd say. But when I looked it up, there was no Pine Ridge anywhere near here. I didn't call him out. Not yet. I wanted to be sure. One evening, as we sat on the couch, he told me he'd seen a bald eagle swoop down over a river that afternoon. His eyes lit up as he spoke, and for a second, I almost believed him. Almost. But the story felt polished, like a piece of fiction he'd rehearsed in the car on the way home. And when I asked what river it was, he paused just long enough to make my stomach drop before tossing out a name I didn't recognize. That night, I lay in bed listening to him breathe, my mind racing. If there was nothing to hide, why all the missing details? Why the trails that didn't exist, the phone that always died, the complete absence of proof? The questions were piling up, and I knew one thing. I wasn't going to get the answers by sitting at home and waiting. The next weekend, over coffee, I decided to push a little harder. So, show me the pictures from last week, I said, like it was the most casual request in the world. He didn't even blink before launching into another excuse. This time, it was that his phone had overheated in the sun. The weekend before, it was a dead battery. The one before that, he'd simply forgotten to take any. Funny how every hike came with its own brand new technical failure. Later that week, I ran into a friend of mine, a real hiking junkie. I mentioned the trails Ryan claimed to visit, and she tilted her head. Never heard of them. Are you sure they're around here? Her words hung in the air long after we'd parted ways. I'd already had doubts, but now I had something else. Confirmation that I wasn't imagining things. By Friday night, my curiosity had transformed into resolve. I waited until Ryan was in the shower before I finally unzipped that ever-present backpack. My hands were steady, but my heart was pounding. No boots, no trail map, no snacks, just a bottle of cologne, a neatly folded shirt, and, tucked into the side pocket, a half-empty bottle of wine. Hiking gear apparently had taken on a whole new definition. I sat there on the edge of the bed staring at that bottle of wine like it was a confession. The cologne was even worse. Ryan never wore it for me anymore. I remembered the last time he had our anniversary dinner 2 years ago. Now it was nestled in his backpack, heading out the door every Saturday for a hike I apparently wasn't good enough to join. My stomach twisted, but I didn't feel the urge to cry. I felt sharpened, like the pieces were finally clicking into place. The next morning, I tested him. Over breakfast, I asked what time he'd be back from the trail. He said late. Sunset, probably, with that breezy tone he used when he wanted me not to think too much. But the whole time I watched his eyes. He wouldn't hold my gaze for more than a second. If I hadn't known better, I'd have thought he was excited to get going. By now, suspicion wasn't suspicion anymore. It was certainty. And certainty demanded action. I wasn't going to yell or accuse. No, that would give him the upper hand, let him spin some story and turn this into an argument. What I needed was undeniable proof, the kind you don't explain away, and I knew exactly how I was going to get it. I waited until Friday night to set my plan in motion. While Ryan watched TV, I slipped into the kitchen and texted my sister, asking if I could borrow her car the next morning. She didn't ask questions. She just said yes. That's the thing about sisters. They don't need the details to know something's up. I went to bed early, pretending to be tired, but my mind was wide awake, mapping every turn he might take. Saturday morning came, and Ryan was out the door before the sun had fully risen. I gave him a 10-minute head start before grabbing my bag and heading to my sister's car. The backpack, with its cologne and wine, had been slung over his shoulder as he left. I couldn't help but picture him carrying it into whatever lie he was living. Following him would give me the answers I needed. I wasn't afraid of what I'd find anymore. I was prepared for it. In a way, I think I'd been preparing for weeks. Whatever was waiting at the end of that drive wasn't going to break me. If anything, it was going to set me free. The road Ryan took wasn't toward the mountains at all. No winding climbs, no trailhead signs. Instead, we drove, well, he drove, I followed, through quiet country roads lined with tall pines and lazy stretches of open field. The sun was still low, casting everything in that golden morning light that usually makes me feel calm. Today, it just felt like the universe was highlighting every turn he made, making sure I didn't miss a thing. After about 40 minutes, he slowed, turning down a narrow gravel road I'd never noticed before. I kept my distance, heart thudding so loudly I thought I might hear it over the engine. And then I saw it, a small cluster of lakeside cabins, tucked away like a secret. He pulled up to one painted deep green, the kind of place that looked like it belonged on the cover of a rustic travel magazine. And there she was. A woman, standing on the porch, shielding her eyes from the sun as his car rolled in. When he got out, he didn't hesitate. No glance around to see if anyone was watching. Just a smile, an embrace, and a kiss that erased any last shred of doubt I might have had. I stayed far enough back that they wouldn't notice me, parked behind a clump of trees where I had a perfect view. They carried groceries from the trunk, moving in sync like they'd done it 100 times before. She laughed at something he said, tossing her head back, and I realized I'd never heard that laugh from her. But I knew it. It was the kind of laugh a woman saves for someone she feels safe with, or someone she thinks is hers. Watching them, I felt strangely calm. Not numb, not heartbroken, calm, like a detective finally seeing the face of the suspect they've been tracking. There was no room left for, maybe I'm overthinking, or maybe it's innocent. It wasn't, and it never had been. Every Saturday hike had led here, to this little lakeside stage where my marriage was being rewritten without me. I could have stormed in right then, thrown the door open, demanded answers, made a scene so loud the water would carry it across the lake. But that's the thing. Scenes give the other person something to react to. I wanted him cornered, not confronted, and for that, I needed a better stage. I eased the car back onto the road, my hands steady on the wheel. I didn't need to see any more. I had all the proof I could ever want. But as I drove away, a new thought took root, something sharper than anger and cleaner than heartbreak. I wasn't done here. Not yet. If Ryan wanted a double life by the lake, then I'd bring both worlds together in one perfectly timed collision. Back in town, I pulled into the first little cafe I found and opened my phone. It took less than 5 minutes to find the listing for that lakeside cluster of cabins. The moment I saw it, my pulse picked up. There, right next to Ryan's green-painted hideaway, was a rental available for the following weekend. I didn't hesitate. I booked it on the spot. For the rest of the week, I played the part of the oblivious wife, cooking dinner, asking about his hikes, even kissing him goodbye in the mornings. Inside, though, I was crafting every detail. The when, the where, the words I'd use when the truth finally stopped hiding. I got to my rented cabin early, hours before Ryan was due to arrive. The lake was still, the air cool enough to carry the faint scent of pine and damp earth. From my porch, I had a perfect line of sight to his cabin next door, close enough to hear laughter if the windows were open, far enough that I could watch without being seen. It felt almost cinematic, like I was both in the story and directing it. By mid-afternoon, his car finally appeared. I watched him and his companion unload wine, cheese, and what looked like steaks. They settled onto the deck like they'd been doing it for years, her feet in his lap, his hand resting on her knee as if the world outside didn't exist. I sipped my coffee and let the minutes stretch, timing my move. When the sun began to dip, casting that honeyed light over the water, I stood, picked up my bag, and walked the short path to their cabin. My knock was steady, almost casual. It took a moment before the door swung open, and there he was, smiling automatically until his eyes focused on me. The smile slid right off his face. "Emma?" he said, like my name was some foreign word he hadn't spoken in years. His voice was thin, caught between surprise and panic. I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, my bag still hanging from my shoulder. The woman was on the couch, a glass of wine in her hand, her expression flickering between confusion and recognition. The slow realization that she wasn't just in the middle of a casual weekend. She was in the middle of my marriage. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. I placed the bag on the coffee table and slid out a small stack of photographs I'd taken from my car the weekend before. Ryan, arms wrapped around her, their lips inches apart, the green cabin behind them. Each one was like a nail in the coffin, and I laid them out in a neat little row, letting the silence stretch until it was almost unbearable. Then I turned to her, not him. "Hope you like him," I said, my tone calm, almost friendly. "He's all yours now. No joint accounts, no house, and no friends left to call." Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass, but she didn't say a word. I could feel Ryan's eyes burning into me, waiting for me to turn to him, to give him a chance to explain, or at least defend himself. But I didn't. I picked up my bag, walked toward the door, and on my way out, I raised my voice just enough for it to carry to the neighboring cabins. "So much for hiking," I called out, letting the words hang in the warm evening air. Behind me, there was a shuffle. Maybe Ryan moving toward the door, maybe the woman setting her wine down. I didn't care enough to look. The path back to my cabin felt lighter with every step, like I was walking out of more than just a room. I was walking out of years of excuses, half-truths, and carefully packaged lies. By the time I closed my own door, I heard the faint murmur of voices next door, low, tense, and fast. Whatever was happening in that cabin was theirs to deal with now. My part in it was finished, or at least, the part they could see. By Monday morning, the divorce papers were already in motion. I'd called my lawyer from the cabin before I even drove home, my voice steady, my mind clear. The bank transfers had been made days earlier. I wasn't about to leave our shared savings sitting where Ryan could touch them. For once, I was ahead of him, and it felt like slipping into a pair of shoes that actually fit. Word of what happened traveled fast. Too fast, maybe. Friends called, some whispering like they were delivering bad news I didn't already know, others openly furious on my behalf. Family members sent messages that started with, "I can't believe," and ended with, "You deserve better." It was comforting in a way to see his perfect little image unravel in real time. Even the cabin owners called me. They'd heard enough from the neighbors to piece together the story and politely informed me that Ryan wouldn't be welcome there again. I pictured him getting that email, jaw tight, knowing that even his little hideaway had turned its back on him. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled without forcing it. The week after, my phone buzzed with messages from numbers I didn't recognize, people who'd heard the story and wanted to tell me their version of Ryan. Apparently, he'd been rehearsing this role for a long time, with more than one understudy. I didn't reply. I didn't need their details. I had already lived the headline. What mattered now was the space I was carving out for myself in the silence he'd left behind. I went back to work, poured myself into the little things that made me feel grounded, cooking my own breakfast without rushing, buying fresh flowers for the kitchen, walking through the park just because I felt like it. It was strange how quickly the house felt different without his presence. Lighter, quieter, mine. And yet, every so often, I'd think about that green-painted cabin and the woman on the porch. Not with anger, that had burned itself out, but with a kind of detached curiosity. Did she still think she'd won something? Or was she starting to realize that a man who disappears on Saturdays doesn't just do it once? 2 months later, I found myself back at the lake. But this time, it was different. The same cabin I'd rented for my little ambush was now filled with laughter, the clinking of wine glasses, and the easy chatter of friends who'd shown up just to see me smile. We spent the weekend on the deck, watching the water shift from gold to deep blue, taking pictures of everything. The sunsets, the meals, the way the moonlight danced across the ripples. When I posted the photos, I added a caption that made me grin as I typed it. Some views are better when you're not looking at a liar. I didn't tag anyone, didn't name names, I didn't have to. The right people would see it, the right people always do. And as I sat there, feet up, wine in hand, I realized something. The lake hadn't changed, the cabins hadn't changed, and maybe I hadn't either. But the way I saw it all, that was brand new. It wasn't just a getaway anymore. It was mine.